Lance Sexton. We're at week 6. 2 more weeks, and you get the plaque, Lance.
Absolutely. It's they've worked hard up to this point. Just a couple more weeks to wrap up the information they need to be an excellent SBA loan closer.
We were talking just off right before we went on. Make sure that you follow what we're reporting. SBA will be changing the affiliate rule and the franchise rules. Lance and I both expect that to come out mid-December, sometime maybe early December. So make sure you follow up on that and you're up to speed of what's happening on that.
Well, one thing we were talking about, Bob and I have watched changes over the years, and quite often SBA will make a change in December, and it may be effective December 1 or even November 1.
October 1, who knows? Yeah.
So it could impact deals. I have a deal right now that I'm bringing into committee, got approved this morning, and I'm struggling with making that affiliation determination. So I'm anxious to see if they change.
We believe it will be simplified. It's going to make your life easier. It'll make better access to capital for Main Street. Franchise rules, we think it's simply going to be, hey, if Jiffy Lube's on the list, you don't have to do anything else. If mother, son, daughter, niece all own different properties, it's whoever controls it. Then we're going to wipe out a lot of this affiliation tests that really hamper, bluntly, Lance, family-owned businesses.
They really do. And simplification, those two areas of underwriting and closing an SBA loan probably are the grayest areas, Bob, that I walk through when working on SBA projects. It would.
If you get it wrong, you don't have an eligible loan, you don't have a guarantee, so it's a problem.
That's exactly right. And being able, in a franchise circumstance, just to go in, if the name's on the list, it's good, that makes life easier.
Yeah.
And in the affiliate,
Go ahead.
well, the affiliation rule too, Bob, just being able to not have to worry about, for instance, if you've got family members and you've got a parent who has 20% of the deal and they've got other properties, not worrying about what they have in determining the size standard.
We want the parents to loan the money to the kids to start their own business. I mean,
Absolutely.
Where we got this idea that it was bad for uncles and parents to be involved with nieces and sons and daughters is ridiculous. So anyway, SBA's the adult in the room. They're going to change it. Let's go to the poll questions, Joseph. When a SBA loan authorization requires a landlord waiver, do you have difficulty getting one executed? Are we talking about executing the landlord, or are we talking about executing the borrower? I don't know who we're talking about.
Well, Bob, sometimes when you have a landlord waiver requirement, some of the closers may feel like executing the landlord because it's not unusual to have a landlord that's difficult to deal with, and it's not unusual to have one that doesn't want to sign it. Now, if it's required in the authorization, make sure if they're not willing to sign it, that you submit an authorization change request and explain the circumstances, because again, that becomes important if the loan does go into default and you haven't requested the change to the authorization. You could have some issues with a repair.
Lance, is there ever a situation where a prudent lender will waive that?
There are some circumstances, Bob. Being somebody that spends so much time on the liquidation side of the house, I like having the landlord waiver there because, especially if you're doing small business lending on equipment, the landlord could lock the door and take possession of the equipment.
Yeah.
In fact, Bob, my dad is a landlord for commercial buildings. He had a restaurant building that he operated a restaurant in for 25 years. He got a new tenant in. They did not pay their rent timely. He walked in, locked the door, took possession of everything in the building, and sold stuff until he got his past due rent.
How many of your 60% of you said yes? That's very common. We understand that. How many of your SBA loans are unsecured? Well, I don't understand the question, Lance. We have to get security in all our loans, don't we?
Well, not on loans that are less than $25,000, Bob. The SOP clearly states that you can do an unsecured SBA loan under $25,000. And in some circumstances, Bob, if your bank's commercial lending policy allows larger unsecured loans. You can actually do larger ones with an SBA loan.
Again, prudent lender, does a prudent lender get a UCC on those loans less than $25,000?
Well, Bob, when I do a lot of express lines of credit, and I'll take a second or third UCC on something, and in reality, in a liquidation circumstance, it has absolutely zero value, but it's more from a commitment perspective.
I understand.
If you file something, they feel more committed to pay the loan.
Are you aware of an instance when your bank had a guarantee denied on an early defaulted loan where you did not have the verified financial tax returns with the 4506? Please tell me that this isn't happening out there, Lance.
Well,
I know why you asked the question, because it is.
I'd like to do so, Bob. As most of our participants know, I do a lot of loan review, and I've found a number of circumstances where they did not verify the information. And if you have an early default without verified financial information, SBA presumes you're guilty.
And we talked about this last week. Make sure that when those come in, someone check it off and initial it.
Yeah, and it can be as simple as a few checks on the transcript and initials and date.
Is it a practice for your bank to have the executed franchise agreement in file as well as a review of that agreement?
Well, I think the thing to note here is Bob and I talked about the proposed change, and I hope that comes through. But at this point, if you do a franchise loan, a mistake a lot of participants or a lot of participant banks make is they don't have the executed franchise agreement in file. You need to have it.
Point of order, you can do a loan without it being approved on the franchise registry. You can do that. Now you have to get it approved. It has to go GP, and SBA has to sign off on it. But just if someone says, hey, we're a small franchise, Lance is opening up Lance's Burgers, and he's not on the registry, we can get it approved, just so you know.
But the one thing, I want to point out to our closers, at some point before the first disbursement, you need a copy of the or the first disbursement may be for the franchise agreement, but before the loan is fully dispersed, you need a copy of the executed franchise agreement in your loan file, not just a blank copy.
Yeah, and that underwriter better be reviewing that. It may not be executed, but they better be reviewing that in their underwriting process. In your bank's commercial lending policy, do you require life insurance on the guarantors if the loan is fully secured? Interesting question, Lance.
Well, part of it is so many banks, and the SBA sometimes is guilty of this. The SOP clearly reads that if you have a fully secured loan, life insurance is not required unless your bank's commercial lending policy requires it. Wow. So I just was curious how many banks, their in-house commercial lending policy does require life insurance.
About 1/5. And Lance, you and I have talked about this. I feel very strongly about this. It's cheap. It's easy to get. Push your borrow in that direction, whether you're going to get the benefits of that. It's a good financial planning decision.
Well, in particular, Bob, like consulting firms, accounting firms, legal firms, where you have key people, a business that makes and sells a product, sometimes the key person can die and it just moves on and continues to operate. But in those types of businesses that have individuals that are key to revenue production, you want to have life insurance.
Yeah, and it may not, and if you're fully secured, you don't need it. But guess what? It takes care of the spouse, the significant other, the family. So push them in that direction. So week 6, tell me about it.
Well, we talked about how to properly collateralize an SBA loan, and as we all know, SBA does not require a loan be fully collateralized. You're just supposed to take all available collateral. We talked about dealing with leases, the franchise and affiliation portion, which again, SBA is telling us that they're going to greatly simplify both which is nice, which, Bob, means we'll have to alter the closer training in the future. Also, the 4506T, critically important, what you need to do in that area, and insurance coverages that are required. One thing I want to point out about insurance coverage, when you get an SBA loan authorization, make sure and walk through what SBA asks for in terms of insurance coverage. I have seen repairs of the guarantee because you did, for instance, it was an SBA loan that was mostly commercial real estate, but SBA required hazard insurance on the contents. And there was a small portion of equipment. The bank didn't get hazard insurance, and they got repaired for the estimated value. And SBA didn't do a depreciated value, Bob. They went back at the point of origination and took the value at that point.
Because the underwriter said it's worth $75,000, and that's what it's supposed to be worth, even though we got $15,000 on a liquidation sale.
Yeah, and how many times on small loans do we've got some equipment and we go out and look at it and we just put a value on it because it doesn't require a third-party appraisal? And I'd much rather be repaired for the depreciated value than the origination value.
I apologize if I'm repeating myself. Lance has heard this story before. Lance, the only people who make money in the restaurant business are the equipment brokers. They know how to sell high and they know how to buy low.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing, Bob, I went through a liquidation where we sold some restaurant equipment. Guess who the buyer was in the auction? It was a restaurant equipment supplier.
Yeah, because they know what they're doing.
They bought it for 10 cents on the dollar and probably resold it for 50.
Or 100% from your SBA 7A loan closers. Let's see. Let's go to some email questions. May we use E-Tran to make a status change on a loan from dispersed in liquidation to change it back to regular servicing? If so, where do we do that? And should that be SBA 1 now, Lance? Are we able to do that in SBA?
Well, not yet. SBA 1 servicing module is not functional. E-Tran, if you look at the unilateral authority matrix, it clearly states that you can put a loan back into regular servicing unilaterally using E-Tran. Now, Bob, I want to tell you, I've had the experience. It don't work because if you have a regular SBA 7A loan, when it goes into liquidation, it goes to the Herndon Servicing Center. If it's in the Herndon Servicing Center, and I did this, Bob, and it drove me nuts. I put it in liquidation in E-Tran like I know I'm supposed to be able to do, and I go back the next day, and guess what? It's back in liquidation. So I put it back in regular servicing the next day. I come back the next day, and guess what? It's back in liquidation. So I finally crafted a request and sent it to Herndon, and then I called one of my friends in Herndon, the deputy director there, and had a conversation. And there's something that Herndon does when it goes in liquidation. The only way it can come back out of liquidation back into regular servicing is for somebody in Herndon to do it. I have been successful on an express loan in putting it back into regular servicing with E-Tran. So my take is, theoretically, you should be able to do it using E-Tran, and it is unilateral. But in practice, it's not working that way. And Herndon did say they were going to address that.
Yeah. This may not be in your realm of responsibility, but please, it's critically important right now that you clean up those loans in liquidation in your Paris review. Any loans that have been in liquidation for over 3 years, you're going to get dinged. So go in there, and I know if you're a closer, you may not be involved in the liquidation process, but those need to be off the books. They need to be charged off, and someone needs to compare the balances in what SBA says you have and what you have. Critical, Lance.
Well, and I think if you have SBA 1
yes,
and you have access to Paris Review, you can click on it, and you can go down to loans in liquidation for more than 3 years. You can click on that, and it'll give you a list of the loans that you need to take care of. The one gripe I have about the Paris Review score, Bob, it's not as responsive. Like, you can move one out of liquidation into regular servicing, and it takes SBA 30 to 60 days to get it reflected in SBA 1. In ideally, as soon as it moves back into regular servicing, it ought to adjust your repair score.
It should. By the way, the most common mistake, you've charged it off, you've done the wrap-up report, SBA shows there's a couple $100 balance on the loan. And SBA says, send us the emails, we'll clean it up for you. Tell me, we have one more email question. If the 1919 form, if a non-citizen checked, what do we need to complete? And where do we need to send it? Lance, I know these always change. What's going on with non-citizen SBA 7A borrowers?
Well, it's a much longer answer than we have time to access today. What I'm going to recommend is that we've provided you a copy of the 5010 5H. The pages that deal with it are page 103 and 104. Please go in and read that to understand what you need to do. There's documentation that has to be collected in a clearance process that you have to go through. It depends, if they have legal permanent resident status, it's not as difficult to get it cleared to go ahead and move forward with your SBA loan. If they don't have LPR status, there are quite a number of steps you need to go through. But it'd take us an hour, Bob, to cover all of it. So what I'm going to suggest is everybody get your 5010 5H, go to 103 and 104 and read it.
My takeaway, it's not that difficult. The big exception that you and I see in the field is if you have someone who doesn't have legal permanent resident status, you absolutely must get a personal guarantee from the in-house manager.
That's exactly right.
Well, very good. 2 more weeks left. What are we talking about in week 7?
Week 7, we discussed what I think are some very important areas. We talk about use of proceeds. One of the places where a participant bank can get in trouble on closing their SBA loan is not ensuring that the use of proceeds listed on the program match up with what the authorization indicates they should be. We're going to talk about working capital and working capital loans. We are going to talk about refinancing. Refinancing is a very important area for SBA participant banks. We'll talk about escrow. I don't know how many of our people actually do escrows on their commercial real estate loans related to SBA, but you can, in fact, set up an escrow for taxes and insurance. We'll talk about appraisal requirements. The appraisal requirements on SBA loans are very much like what the regulators expect from a bank on a non-commercial loan. Basically, anything over 250 is going to require a third-party appraisal. But we'll talk about those appraisal requirements, construction loans, and we'll talk about the guarantee fee. And the most important thing I can tell you about the guarantee fee is properly calculating it and making sure that you pay it on time.
I made a mistake the other day on that. I sent it to you to verify my math, and you said, Coleman, you're wrong. So we'll go through that.
Well, the guarantee fee calculation is not always as simple as it appears, and it's important to know how to properly calculate the guarantee fee. And the nice thing, Bob, is SBA 1 is not functional yet. SBA 1 has a guarantee fee calculator on it, and I was clicked on it the other day, Bob, because I didn't want to fire up my old school calculator. And it's not functional yet. And there's a guarantee fee calculator at the SBA's website. But
I didn't know that.
I typically just break out my old school calculator and take the chart and calculate it myself.
The takeaway in the guarantee fee calculator is be careful of multiple loans. You could have
absolutely
for $275, and then if you fund a subsequent loan of another $250,000. That's going to bump up the guarantee. And if you don't pay that guarantee fee, guess what, Lance?
It gets canceled. And here's the thing. I do this frequently, Bob. I'll do a 7A loan for the big part of the loan, and then I'll do a revolving express loan behind it. If you close those two loans within 90 days of each other, the mistake a lot of people make, say you do a $100,000 express loan. Well, everybody knows that loans under $150 don't have a guarantee fee. A lot of people make the mistake when they do the express loan thinking there's no guarantee fee. And so they don't put it in there, they don't send the money in, and then the express loan cancels. If you do two loans within 90 days of each other, say you did 500 on the 7A and 100 on the express loan is like it's the 500 and first dollar through 600,000. So it's important to understand how that works. And we'll cover that in week
Lance,
7.
I appreciate that you love the minutia. I'm sure everyone's rolling. Some of them are rolling your eyes over this weeds discussion, but this is important stuff. Anyway, enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you on Friday next week.
Have a great weekend.